Hello everyone, and welcome to Counselor Feature Friday. I'm your host, Brian Urban. In these features, we hope to give you some simple tips, tidbits, and tricks to make your days easier and your patients happier. In this feature, we're going to talk about tracking TPA and managed care devices. Typically kind of a complicated topic, and it's something that's very important to track specifically in your office management systems so that you have good data and you can see what's happening across your clinic and make good decisions going forward. So there's a few ways that Counselor can assist with this. First off, just at the outset, we're happy to talk with you directly about setting up the features that I'll be talking about during this video. So as you're going through this, certainly go ahead and work on setting it up, but we're always happy to assist. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to start kind of at the end. I'm going to show you the process of creating an invoice for TPA or managed care, and then show you the setup after that. Now, just a little definition here. Of course, by TPA, we're talking about third-party administered plans. These are hearing aid benefits, such as like True Hearing, and there's a whole variety of plans like that. Oftentimes, one of the stumbling blocks is that the device itself is a zero charge, because as a practice, you're not charging the patient for the device. You're charging the third-party administered plan for the services that you provided to the patient. Same idea with managed care, where we're talking about, for example, take Medicaid. Oftentimes the pricing is different than what your usual and customary pricing may be. So the sum total of this is that you oftentimes want to track these separately. And if you're calculating, for example, ASPs, you don't necessarily want a $0 True Hearing Aid device to calculate in with your otherwise, private pay ASPs. So what I'm going to show you here is how that can all be separated out and viewed all at the same time. So like I said, we're going to start here within a patient profile. I'm going to start to create a new invoice. Just very quickly here, we'll jump into the invoice itself. Now, as I'm going to show you in a bit here, you can create different line item types. You can see here I have one for hearing aid and one for hearing aid TPA. Now you can create as many of these as you like. What this does, it allows you to segregate your line item lists and treat them separately, which then means that Counselor can track them separately or as an aggregate, which once again I'll show you in just a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and choose hearing aid TPA. Now that'll bring open the specific list that we have created for that. So this list may be different, right, than your standard usual and customary list. Maybe shorter, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's get very specific here and let's look at a True Hearing device. So we'll go ahead and add the advanced one in this case. As I mentioned, here, of course, it's $0 for the price per unit, so we'll leave that as is. We're going to go ahead and enter our information like we normally would, of course, for any other hearing instrument. So we'll enter this in. I'll put the basic details in here. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and click Add. That, of course, will add this device to the invoice. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy that so we have a second one. All, of course, I have to do here is enter the serial number. All right, so now we have both devices added to the invoice. Typically at this point you'd add in your service charges as well. We won't be covering this topic here, but you also could have a bundle. If for these TPAs or managed cares you have several line items. For example, you could have electroacoustic evaluation, you could have conformity, your fitting fee, right? Those could be all as one bundle. So therefore when you want to add it, you just simply say, okay, let's add the binaural fitting fee, in this case for Medicaid, to this, right? So you can, once again, we're happy to help you set these up. So it's just standardized. You pick the bundle, it adds it in. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just add in one quick service here for a fitting fee, just to get that in place. Okay, so there's our $200 charge for the fitting fee. By the way, if these numbers do not reflect what True Hearing and either managed care or TPA do, just ignore that. This is all for an example. All right, so now we have these devices added for Kyle. Let's see how this is tracked then. Let's go back to the dashboard and let's look at, for example, the units widget. If I wanted to see all of my hearing aids, of course, I would go ahead, or as I said, private pay hearing aid sales, I'll click on hearing aid, right? If I want to see specifically just my TPAs, I can separate those out. And there we go. We have 6 this month, none returned thus far. Okay, and of course I could download that specific report for the month or for the entire year. Okay, you also, of course, can see that within the business report generator. So, for example, if you look in the sales summary, we could separate out, once again, our private pay versus our TPAs, or if we had another line item type for Medicaid, for example. So, point being is it allows you to get very specific. Now, in these sales summaries, you also can aggregate that, right? So you could say, show me all the hearing aid types, or just show me the TPAs. So, as I mentioned before, you can split out the data, or you can show it in aggregate. Okay, so that's how the data can be added, for example, to an invoice, viewed from the dashboard and the report generators. Let's look at the behind the scenes setup on some of this. So as I mentioned before, you can have as many line item types as you wish. So let's go there. And what we can see here is this is where we have set up the hearing aid TPA versus our kind of private pay. And you can label these, of course, however you want to make sure they're nice and obvious. One feature I haven't reviewed so far is you do have the opportunity, if you wish, to decide whether or not something like the hearing aid TPA line item type is considered an opportunity. Now, this just be a decision internally for you and your practice. For example, you may not view Medicaid patients, Medicaid beneficiaries, as being quote unquote opportunities versus a private pay patient that came out, from a newspaper ad. Okay, so that would you could set that differently based on the type, depending on how you wish to track this. Okay. But so you'd set this up within the line item type, and then as I mentioned, you can have your own line item list. That would allow you to, once again, set your own list here. So if we look at the hearing aid TPA, for example, I had True Hearing listed within this list. Maybe it only exists on this list, right? It's not on the private pay list. So you can be very specific with this as well. Now, there's one other thing I didn't mention with the setup is that there's also the ability to set a device purchase type. And that's where, once again, I apologize, I went through that quickly. Under invoices here, you can set your device purchase types. And then here's just some example ones we threw in here. But here's one specifically for example, True Hearing. This allows you to very quickly at the device level add kind of a tag to that device so that you can actually decide or kind of gives you an indication of what's going on with that device. So let's go ahead and just take this one here. I'm going to take this device. I can set the purchase type as True Hearing. So even if this isn't a True Hearing, labeled device, I can still tag this as True Hearing. So once I get back to the device screen, now I can see that indication along with it. So that's kind of a nice way of seeing maybe more information about this device without having to dig too deeply. Just at a surface level, you can see that very, very quickly. All right. Of course, with all of this, as I mentioned at the outset, if you have any questions, please let us know. We're always happy to kind of walk you through this to help you get your line item list set up. There's some things we can do behind the scenes to make that kind of quicker and easier for you, as well as we're happy to work with you and your staff to make sure the workflow is nice and obvious, depending on the scenario. And that may mean setting up different purchase agreements or different things like that. So once again, this is an area that has a great deal of value. It takes a little work on the upfront, both from the setup and from training your staff, but it can really help you down the road in tracking your overall data. So, like I said, call us, email us, live chat us. We're always happy to help. So thank you very, very much for joining us for Counselor Feature Friday. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.